They said my son was wasting his life after dropping out of college. At my nephew's graduation party, they laughed, whispered, and pointed. But an unexpected guest walked in, called Eli by name, and changed everything. My name's Ashley Miller, and this is the story of the moment they realized they never really knew who he was. Before we get started, where are you tuning in from? Are you in the middle of the morning rush or on a late-night drive? Drop a comment below. You're about to hear everything that happened after I made the choice that changed everything. I almost didn't go. The invitation came in a heavy white envelope with embossed gold lettering and a printed return address, just like Janet would have done it. Dr. Connor Parker, graduation dinner celebration. The kind of formal, over-the-top invite that doesn't feel like family, it feels like performance. And coming from my sister Janet, that's exactly what it was. Janet has always been polished. The type who plans her grocery list in color-coded spreadsheets and irons her tablecloths 3 days before guests arrive. Her son, Connor, had just graduated from Johns Hopkins Med School, and this dinner at their country club was the final flourish. And of course, everyone would be there. The relatives who ask too many questions, the family friends who remember you at your worst, the kind who turn curiosity into judgment. I didn't want to bring Eli into that. He's 24 now. Kind, brilliant, quiet. But he dropped out of art school last year, an act Janet still refers to in lowercase, the decision. She thinks he gave up. What she doesn't know is that he left because he didn't want to just be good. He wanted to be great. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing work that meant something to him. When I showed him the invitation, I expected him to decline, but instead, he nodded once and said, "Let's go." So we did. That Saturday, Eli put on the only blazer he owns, a charcoal one with sleeves slightly too short, and I wore the same green dress I'd worn to 3 different weddings. The drive to the club was quiet. I could see his reflection in the passenger window, eyes focused, jaw set. He wasn't nervous. He was prepared. As we pulled into the lot, the rows of high-end cars made my little Corolla feel like it didn't belong. I parked near the end, where no one would hear the engine sputter. Inside, everything was exactly as I expected. Crystal chandeliers, glass water pitchers, small plates stacked with expensive hors d'oeuvres. Janet was greeting guests with a champagne flute in one hand and her signature tight smile. "Karen," she said when she saw me, "you made it." "I said we would," I replied. Her eyes flicked to Eli. "You look rested," she said, as if that were a compliment. Sometimes a little time off is exactly what people need when they're figuring things out. Eli didn't flinch, just nodded politely, but I felt the sting. As we made our way to the table, I heard someone whisper behind us, "That's her son, the one who dropped out, right?" This was exactly the stage I had feared, but I also knew something they didn't. The script they were all following was about to flip, and none of them saw it coming. We sat near the back, as far from the spotlight as possible. The round tables were covered in pristine white linen, each topped with a tower of flowers that looked too symmetrical to be real. Waiters in black ties drifted through the room like ghosts, refilling glasses and offering bite-sized appetizers we couldn't pronounce. Eli sat beside me, silent but alert. He didn't fidget, didn't check his phone. He simply observed, like he was watching a play he wasn't part of. The conversations around us flowed like champagne, effortless, polished, and full of hidden barbs. People leaned across tables to toast Connor's future, to talk about his residency at Johns Hopkins, the scholarships, the awards. Every other sentence was a glowing endorsement. I wasn't surprised. Connor had always been the golden child, smart, obedient, predictable. Janet had curated him the same way she did her dinner parties, flawlessly. And as much as I wanted to be happy for him, I couldn't ignore the way people started turning toward Eli like he was the shadow of someone else's success. "So Eli," said a distant cousin in a crisp blue suit, "what are you up to these days? Still on that art break?" Eli smiled politely. "I'm working on a project." "Oh, that's great. Taking time to explore. I wish I had that kind of flexibility in my 20s, the man chuckled, already turning away before Eli could respond. Another woman leaned over from the next table. "Are you still doing those, what do you call them, cartoons?" "Animation," Eli said gently. Right. And how's that going?" "It's going well." She nodded, clearly uninterested in hearing more. "Well, hey, whatever makes you happy. Connor always said not everyone's cut out for the grind. My jaw clenched. Janet stood near the stage, beaming like it was her degree in the frame. When the room quieted and the speeches began, I already knew how this would go. Her husband led with the usual praises. Connor's GPA, his early internship at the Mayo Clinic, the fellowship. The room clapped like a well-oiled machine. Then Janet stepped up, glass in hand. "Some kids just know what they want," she said, eyes sweeping the crowd. "They stay focused. They don't get distracted chasing whims or switching paths. They commit, and they finish what they start." There it was. The line dropped like a brick in the middle of the room. The pause after was brief, but heavy. Then came the polite chuckles, the sideways glances. I felt them land on Eli like darts. He didn't react. He didn't blink. He just sat there with his back straight, his face unreadable. But I knew him too well to miss the shift in his eyes. Quiet, deliberate, sharp. He wasn't humiliated. He was preparing. Janet returned to her seat like she'd said something noble. Around us, the room buzzed with admiration for Connor. But I didn't care about the applause. I cared about the boy beside me, who they all thought had been broken by his choices. They didn't realize he was just beginning, and soon they'd find out. Dinner had been served, and the hum of conversation had picked up again. Laughter floated through the room, silverware tapped gently against porcelain, and the speeches seemed to be done, or so I thought, until Janet stood up again, her glass raised delicately. "I know we've done the formal part," she said with a smile so practiced it almost looked sincere, "but I just have one more thing to say." Eli paused mid-bite. I felt his whole body go still beside me. Janet turned toward the crowd, her voice sweet, smooth, and absolutely rehearsed. "Connor's always had vision," she said. "He's always had direction. In a world where so many young people get lost or distracted, drop out, chase impractical dreams, Connor stayed the course." She let that hang. A few people chuckled. A few didn't, but enough did, and every one of them turned their gaze, not toward Janet, not toward Connor, but toward us. Toward Eli. I didn't look around. I didn't need to. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down like humidity before a storm. Eli sat perfectly still, his fork resting on the edge of his plate. His face didn't change, but I saw the tiniest twitch in his jaw. That's how I knew it landed. My chest burned. I wanted to stand up, to say something, to defend him. But then I felt Eli's hand brush my elbow, just briefly a signal. Don't. I looked at him, and what I saw wasn't embarrassment or defeat. It was focus, calm, a strange, grounded clarity. He wasn't crushed. He was done pretending. The rest of the room moved on. More wine was poured. Plates were cleared. Janet returned to her table like she'd delivered some kind of gospel. I heard her murmur to someone nearby, "It's just reality. Some kids need structure, others just float." I stayed seated, my hands wrapped tightly around my glass of water. I couldn't stop thinking about how easily people accept the story they're most comfortable with. That Eli had failed, that Eli had drifted, that Eli was the cautionary tale. None of them knew that he'd been up till 3 a.m. the night before finalizing animation frames for a short film that had already caught the attention of a major studio. None of them knew he was preparing for a virtual pitch to a panel of producers next week. They didn't know because he hadn't told them. Not because he was hiding, because he didn't need their permission. The people who whisper about failure are always the ones who think success only looks one way. But Eli was about to teach them a new language entirely. He stood up a moment later and quietly excused himself. "I'm just going to get some air," he said. I watched him walk through the crowd like he didn't owe anyone anything, and I didn't follow. Because I knew he wasn't walking away in defeat. He was stepping out for his entrance. I stayed seated, watching the party blur back into motion around me. Janet was back to holding court at her table, laughing with a hand on Connor's shoulder while guests rotated through to offer praise. The clink of glasses, the rustle of linen napkins, everything returned to its curated, comfortable rhythm. You'd never know that just moments ago she had publicly reduced my son to a punchline. But I knew. And so did Eli. He had been gone for maybe 5 minutes, stepping out for air. Though I could feel it wasn't just to breathe, it was to center himself, to choose how he wanted to respond. And that's when it happened, the soft hum of a car outside. Not loud, not flashy, just enough to break through the ambient noise. At first, no one noticed. Then the front doors opened, and a man in a navy suit stepped inside. He wasn't part of the catering team or a guest. He carried no gift, No drink, just a tablet under one arm and an expression of quiet purpose. He scanned the room once, then walked with intent straight through the tables, past the laughter, past the decorations, until he stood in the center of the floor. "Excuse me," he said, calm but clear. "I'm looking for Eli Miller." I froze. Heads turned. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The room, so confident a moment before, felt like it had exhaled and forgotten how to breathe. Eli re-entered from the side hallway. His hands were in his pockets, his blazer still a little snug at the sleeves, but he walked tall, taller than I'd ever seen him. "I'm Eli," he said, voice steady. The man offered a small nod. "Mr. Miller, we spoke briefly last month. I'm here on behalf of Caliber Studios. Your short film has been selected for the Northlight Showcase. You've been awarded a full 6-month creative residency in San Francisco, and we'd like to schedule your onboarding. We tried calling, but you didn't respond." Eli nodded once. "Sorry." I had the notifications off. The room was dead silent. Connor blinked. Janet stared, her mouth slightly parted. One of the cousins actually dropped a fork. "I've got your packet and itinerary here," the man continued, handing Eli the tablet. "They've asked me to accompany you for a quick interview for the press release. If you're ready, we can go." Eli turned toward me, and for the first time that evening, he smiled. Not wide, not arrogant, just full. Like someone who had been carrying the truth long enough and finally got to lay it down in front of everyone. "I'm ready," he said, and then with the entire room watching, some stunned, some suddenly embarrassed, he shook the man's hand and walked toward the exit. No speech, no retaliation, just presence. I watched them leave, a wave of warmth rising in my chest. The boy they dismissed? He just rewrote the room. And they didn't even see the pen in his hand. For a few moments after the door closed behind Eli and the man from Caliber Studios, no one said a word. The room sat suspended in stunned silence, as if even the chandeliers didn't dare sparkle too loudly. It wasn't just surprise. It was the kind of disruption that rearranges a room's entire atmosphere. Janet was frozen in place, a champagne flute halfway to her lips. She blinked like she wasn't sure what had just happened, like her carefully crafted narrative had short-circuited in real time. Connor looked around, confused. Not angry, not offended. Just unsure what to do now that he wasn't the only headline. Eventually, someone near the back clapped. One slow, hesitant clap, then another, and then silence again. Because applause would have meant acknowledgement, and too many people had spent the last hour talking about Eli like a footnote, not a main character. No one dared say the obvious. But I knew they were all thinking it. We were wrong. I stayed seated, not smug, not gloating, just still. One of Janet's friends leaned in and whispered something to her. I saw Janet force a smile, that rigid kind she used when she needed control. "Well," she said a little too loudly, "I guess Eli's little hobby paid off after all." But the words fell flat. No one laughed. You see, the thing about truth is, it doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs a moment, and Eli took his. Later that night after we got home, I walked past his room. The door was open. The desk light was on. His tablet sat on the bed, glowing with a calendar full of new deadlines and flight details, and beside it, his sketch pad, the same one he started in high school, pages torn, edges worn, full of raw beginnings that no one had ever seen but me. I didn't step inside. I just stood there, hand resting on the doorframe, letting the quiet fill me. Eli came home a few hours later. I heard the front door open and close, the shuffle of his shoes on the mat. He walked into the kitchen where I was making tea. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. "They asked if I wanted to give a quote for the press. I said no." I looked up. "Why not?" He smiled faintly, reaching for a mug, because today wasn't about explaining myself. That hit me deep. He didn't go to that party to prove anyone wrong. He went to stand in the space where people had made up their minds about him and simply be who he was. No flash, no revenge, just presence. And in doing that, he didn't just reclaim his story. He rewrote all of theirs. I handed him the tea. "I'm proud of you." This time, he didn't brush it off. He just said, "I know." And that was enough, because the truth had already spoken, and it spoke in his name. What about you? Have you ever had to make a difficult family decision that changed everything? We'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. We read every single one. If you're into real-life family drama like this, make sure to subscribe for more.